Hey everyone, Konstantin here. I want to show you the new workflow version 2. One thing that I want to mention before is that there is some issue with backwards compatibility, especially when you're using AE23, because there are of course the selectable track match, which ruined my life. This stupid decision by Adobe, but I mean it's gonna improve it. It's improving workflow of course as well, so that's nice. But I've never had to suffer that much in my life, so let's put it like that. All right, so the backwards compatibility thing. For one, if you want to switch back to the older workflow version 1, and of course connected to that is even if you want to use workflow version 2, but you want to use it in AE22 compared to AE23, you want to downgrade it first to 22. So as you know, or some of you know, you can also just save a copy in After Effects actually as 22 compatible, but this will not work for workflow. So what you will have to do is go to the main menu, and there you have this option, convert project to older workflow/AE version, and then you can come to this dialog. So let's say you want to work in A22 but still work in workflow version 2. Then just check this option and then hit on convert. Alright, now I want to show you how to install this new workflow version. So I'm coming up to my file browser here. You have a few files inside of here. I would just recommend to use the Manage app from aescripts, which is really great. And this will install all the necessary files for you. However, if you want to do it the manual way, then the first thing, there's the regular workflow.js expand file. So you're just going to copy it, then go to the After Effects scripts folder. This is the path for the scripts folder, and there you can just paste it. I already, of course, have it in here. Additionally, there are two other files that you can install, but you don't have to. There's now the ScriptUI Panel, which so many of you have been waiting for. And it finally is here. And yeah, you just go to copy and then go to the ScriptUI Panels folder and then, paste it in here. I, of course, have it in here as well. Now, this is an optional file. You don't have to install it if you don't want to. However, this file is really mandatory, the main script file. Otherwise, the ScriptUI panel just won't work. So you need to at least install this one. And then there's also the plugin file that you can install. This makes it possible so you can just double click on a group header and it will be open and closed. What is important here, that you have to take this whole folder, and I'm going to go to support file, plugins. And it is important that you take this whole folder, copy it, and then just paste it here, right? I already have it. And but don't just copy the plugin file itself. You need to have this folder structure, this folder copied into here. Shout out to Terrible Junk Show, who's also an author on aescripts, who thankfully provided us all with this great plugin that I just, modified a bit to make it work with Workflow. One thing with this plugin file, there's an issue on Mac. So most likely when you'll first open up After Effects with that plugin installed, you get an error message that, Mac cannot scan for suspicious software. I mean, you have to take my word for it, I guess, but I would say it's fine. Afterwards, just open up Workflow and that will give you instructions how to get rid of that. It's pretty simple. It's just one button to click, but it will show you how to do it. Alright, so this feature really has been the most requested feature. And yeah, it's the most simple thing you can imagine, the most basic thing for every other script, which is a ScriptUI panel. And it seems like totally trivial, and you wonder why the fuck did this take so long. Well, I know, it would be really complicated to explain. It was really difficult to implement it for this specific script and to do it in a way that works properly and everything. And yeah, but here it finally is. And I'm keeping up with the After Effects tradition, how After Effects features are supposed to be developed, right? The ones that seem the most basic thing take the longest. But eventually they come. And here it is. I'm going to show it to you. So you go to Window, as you of course probably know. And then down here there is the Workflow ScriptUI panel if you have it installed. And you can dock it anywhere you want. So let me just dock it here as an example. And it also comes in different configurations. So if I were to move this here, you'll see now I can dock it like this. Or you could also dock it like this here. Or the way I prefer it, just dock it on the side. And now we have it nicely here. And then of course we can just create a group from here and do all this stuff we want to do. We can use our modifier keys. Now we can dissolve this group again and all of these things. One more thing with the ScriptUI panel. Let's say you want to dock it like here. But if I dock it like here, maybe I want the timeline to be a bit smaller, but then the icons are not really visible here anymore. So what you can do is go to the settings and then go to the MISC section, and there you can click on Customize ScriptUI buttons. And now I can say, alright, maybe I don't need the Precompose button here, and I don't need the Enable Disable group and the Solo group, and maybe I also don't need the refresh function here. And then I can click on Apply, and then I click on Save. And now this is much tidier, and now it can neatly fit into the space I have here. However, I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna turn all of them on again. One thing to note about executing functions from this panel, let's say I would want to relabel this group. So I select this here and I go to Relabel Layers, and then this dialog appears in the center of the screen. However, probably I would rather want to have it here, and the good thing is if you close it and if you press it again, it will appear exactly at the position that you left it the last time. So this, let me just relabel this, and this is also another nice thing just about the relabel tool. Doesn't have to do anything with the panel, of course. There are now these numbers here that you could press, or the letters. So let's say I would want to relabel it to this green down there, then I just press 9, and this now has been relabeled here. One thing that sometimes happens with this panel that I noticed is that in very rare cases, let's say you want to precompose this, for example, for whatever reason, and then you are going to this panel and click on it. Sometimes this function will not execute because somehow After Effects thinks only this panel is selected and there is no active composition selected. And then of course if there's no active composition, then workflow will not execute anything. So what you then have to do is, if a button doesn't do anything, you just have to select the comp again and then click on the button again, and then 99% of the cases it works. Maybe also another thing could be that there's something with the internal workings of the panel, and what you can also then do is just right click on empty space here, not on a button, and then you also have this option here, Restart ScriptUI Panel. And this also then helps in some of these other instances. Or you could also just, of course, restart it manually by closing the panel and opening it back up again from here. Alright, another nice addition is the new double-click behavior. And for those of you who are just tuning in just for that, make sure to go to how to install, if you're installing it manually, to the section, the previous section in this tutorial, to set everything up. But if you have the plugin installed to use the double click feature, it's pretty straightforward. So what you can just do is just double click on a group header, and this will open and close the group. And yeah, it's a much more fluid thing than having to press the shortcut. So this is really nice, and it's a lot of fun to do that. One thing to note, it just doesn't work when you have multiple groups. So for example, if I would want to close these two, this will not do anything. So if you want to close more than one, you will still have to use the workflow function for that. Also, if you want to close all of them and open them back up again, this will also only just work if you use the dedicated script function for it. And another thing is you can also just select the group. So if you hold on Alt or Option and then double click, this will now select the entire group. And then of course you could move it around and whatever, but I don't want to do that now. And yeah, you could also just disable the entire group. If we hold on Shift and you double click onto the group header, this will just disable it. Now I can enable it. And you can also just solo it. If you hold on Control or Command and Shift and you double click, this will just solo this group here. Another thing that is new now are certainly easier ways to learn workflow. One thing are extended tooltips. So if you hover over the functions, as you can see, you now get very detailed explanations of what they do. And if you hold on one of the modifier keys, now we also see the information for merge mats here, for example. Let's say for create mat, now I want to find out a bit more. Another new thing that has been added now is that you can right click onto the function, and there you have different options. You can go right to the user guide chapter, for example. And this will open up the user guide chapter, or you could just go directly to the video tutorial chapter about how to create a mat, and then yeah, you'll get here right away. Another thing is, let's say you don't want these tooltips to always appear, right? Which can be a bit annoying because they get over all the timeline space. And if you don't feel like learning now, or you already know everything, then you can just right click, and then you can also either go to use simple tooltips, and this is rather the way everything used to be before. So this is just the function name and the shortcut there. Or if you're like a super pro, then you can also go to turn all tooltips off. And now you don't have anything coming in the way. I would actually turn them on for now, but I prefer it at the moment to have just my simple tooltips. And another new thing that has been introduced are pop-up tips you get when first executing a function. So let's say we would be grouping these here. So let's create a group here. And then it tells you, great, you just create your first group. And then you can just show all the tips. It tells you about these child layers and yeah, all of these things. And if you don't want that, if it's annoying you, just go to never show tips, and it will not be displayed for you. Next up are the new matting tools, which have been improved and are much faster now, especially group mats. Alright, so how do group mats now work? And of course this will only apply if you use AE23. If you use AE22, of course you will have the old behavior. So let's say I'm coming up to these stars, and now I'm gonna click on create mat. This will now create a mat as you're used to, but you already see there are no other mats on top of these group layers, and yeah, they have been just linked with the new selectable track mats to the group mat layer. And now if I create a mask here, you see that this now works perfectly. And it's also just, if you just look at the speed, how fast I can move it around, this has also been greatly improved compared to the old system. Now I could also just change the blending mode to, let's say, Silhouette Alpha here, but it won't update the way it used to do in the old version. Now you have to hit refresh layout and then it will update, and that is just because it will update these track mats here. And this, of course, can't be linked by expressions. So that's why you have to hit refresh layout when changing those. And also, what of course also works, let's say I have a new layer here. And if I want to just add it to this group, then I can just do it and then execute refresh layout. And now it will also automatically get the group mat. And if I were to move it outside of this group and execute refresh layout, then this mat will be removed automatically from the layer as well. Now, what will happen when I create a mat from the upper group that also contains the circles and the rectangles? If I do that and I execute create mat on this, you'll see that all of the layers are now matted, and I can just quickly create a group mat for everything here. But you'll see that something has changed. So now we have this mud layer here, but we also have an intermediate merge layer here. And you also see it on above this layer. There's also this merge layer. And this is because muds have to be merged now. And on this mat layer, now both the group mats, so from this stars group, for example, and from the shapes group, they will be merged onto that intermediate merge layer, and all the layers within the group are referencing that intermediate merge layer. But an advantage of this is now, because we're just going through these effects here, and we're not referencing this mat layer as a track mat directly. You see all of these layers here are just referencing the intermerge layer here as well. That now also the blending mode can be linked by expression, and now you see this has been linked. But you also see if I move it around, it's lagging a bit, and that's just because of the fact that we're going through these effects here, and we're not referencing the mat layer directly by the track mats. However, all in all, it's still so much faster than previous versions of Workflower, because in previous versions every single layer had to have a unique track mat applied to it, and there was, you know, this effect or these effects on it, and they all had to be calculated for every layer individually, which kind of could bog down your system quite a lot. And we also have intermerged layers in other cases. I'm just going to delete this now, and you see as soon as I delete this and only the stars group has the track mat, it will revert back to this what is called a simple group mat, not a merged group mat basically. But as soon as another condition applies that would make it necessary for this intermerged layer to exist, so let's say I have this layer here and I want to add a track mat to it, then I'm going to create mat, I'm going to hit OK, and now I have this track mat and I can mat this layer, right? But just because now we have to merge these mats onto this track mat here, we will have to have this intermerged layer here again as well. So this is another condition where an intermerged layer will be necessary. I'm going to delete it now. And yet another condition where it is necessary is if I create an external mat. So let's say this is my external mat. I'm going to turn on continuous rasterization for it. And I'm going to get it here, and I'm going to turn it off for now. And now I'm going to use as the mat layer this external mat. Then I need to execute refresh connections. Now this has been applied, this mat has been applied to this layer, but now this intermerged layer has been created again that is referencing this external mat. Another thing you know that you can do is to use the group header as a mat layer. Also, if that is the case, then also this intermerged layer has to be created. Alright, I hope that wasn't too confusing to you. I know it's a bit confusing, but you'll probably get the hang of it. I'm gonna set this back to my regular group mat layer here. Also, mud merge layers behave a bit differently, although they behave pretty much the same, but you have to be aware of a bit. So let's say, alright, let's say I'm just gonna delete this group mat here for now, and I wanna create a mat to this layer. Now I have created a mat to this layer. Great. And now I want to create another mat to this layer. And now our mud merge layer has been created here, where these both mats have been added. What you can do now, of course, in AE23 is that you could basically move this layer down here, and it would still reference this track mat. But let's say I would create a new mat to this layer here, click OK. You'll see that it will create a new mud merge layer and not use the existing one because they're not directly linked. Workflow will only consider them as to be linked when the mud merge layer is directly above the matted layer. I'm gonna go back here. So always make sure that the layer is directly below the mud merge layer. Also, if you were just to shift it like this and now you were to execute refresh layout, workflow will also notice that the mud merge layer is not directly above it, it will just move it there. But it won't move the mud collection group, so just move it like this. So let's say I would want to use this layer and I want to use the track mat of this one. And now I can use the mat of this mud merge layer here as well. But I could also, of course, just create a new mat here if I want to. And now I'm having a mud merge created here. But you see that as our first mat here, this mud merge layer itself has been referenced. Another thing I'm kind of excited about is yet another way how to create a mat. So you already know if you just have your layer selected and you press create mat, you just, create a track mat to it. But now if you were to have a set mat effect applied to it and you have this effect selected, then if you go to create mat, this will now create a mat to it, and I can mat this now. But you see it will be only created from the set mat effect. And you see that the transforms align, although there is no collapse transformation enabled. So if there's no collapse transformation enabled, the created mat will be created at exactly the same dimensions as this. So if I can also toggle the mat visibility, but by default the opacity is set to 0, but you can toggle it back on and you see they have exactly the same dimensions and are exactly at the same position, and it also has been connected to this layer with parenting. Let's say I'm going to delete it now and we get this error, so we have to delete this one again. But now let's say if I create another set mat effect here and I turn on collapse transformation and I have this selected, now click on create mat, then the mat will be created with collapse transformation, and the advantage of this of course is that you can move the mat freely around and you don't have to care about the actual position. You also have this checkbox respect in-out points, so you see the mat only applies when the in point comes of that. And this also works for other effects. So in this case, it doesn't make sense so much. But let's say I have a camera lens blur here, and I want to create the blur map to it. What I would do first is set this to effects and mask. With the set matte effect, this will be automatically done for you, set to effects and masks. However, with these other effects, this isn't implemented yet. That workflow will do this automatically just because it's really difficult in scripting, so don't get me started on that. But now just set it to effects and masks and then go to create matte, and now this has been created, and as you can see it has been linked to it, and then you can build your blur layer map really easily without much setup basically. And this works for every effect that has a layer control. When you have it selected and you execute create matte, then it will always set up everything like that for you. Workflow is great if you want to group layers that are directly above each other. However, there are also cases where I want to quickly act on a certain set of layers that might not necessarily be directly above each other. That's why there's layer tagging, so now you can tag certain layers and perform certain actions on these tag groups. One example of this would be for this shot where this guy is sailing into a storm. Very often in compositing or whatever, I have a lookup table above everything. And what kind of annoys me sometimes is that, let's say in this case, I'm way down here working on the waves, for example, and I solo them here, and I now want to see that with the lookup table. Then I have to go all the way up again, enable the lookup table, go back down again, and then work here, and then now I don't want to see it again, so I go back up again, disable it, then go down again to work on it. So it can be a bit annoying, especially once your comps get bigger. So this would be one use case, for example, for the layer tagging. So I could go up here and I could select the lookup table. Then I go to the menu and I hold on Shift and I go to Tag, Untag Layers. Or on Windows you can also hold on Control, Shift and B. And this brings up this Tag, Untag Layers menu. And then I can choose one of the label colors. In this case I'm going to go with the first slot here with red. And then I can give this tag a name. So I'm calling this lookup table. And now this tag has been created here. Now let's go down here and let's go to our waves, and I'm gonna solo them. So now you go to the perform action on tag layers, and this will bring up a new menu, and you can also just use a shortcut for it, Control Shift and 2 on Windows, or on Mac it's Control and R. And you already see there's one group here. It says LU for lookup table. You see inside also, if you hover over it, you see which layer is contained in there. It says it's one layer and it's the slot number 1. And then I can select an action. The first one is activate, and activate means basically to enable it and also to solo it if necessary, as in this case. So because it's already enabled, I don't just want to enable it. Of course I could also just solo it, but let's say it's disabled, then activate makes sure that you will definitely see it no matter what. You can also lock your layers, you can select what is in the group, you can toggle the effects, you can toggle the motion blur, or you can jump to it in the timeline. And you can also toggle through these actions here with a shortcut. And the shortcut is named here, so I can hold on O or L or X, and that way I can toggle through these actions. And I could also just hold on the 1 key to just execute this one. And now, as you can see, this has been enabled now, and if I want to, or activate it, and if I want to deactivate it, just go there. But there's also a quicker way. I could just come up to the menu and I can hold on Control or Command. And there we have basically a shortcut to activate, deactivate tag group 1. And this will just act on the tag group 1. And there's also, if you hold on Alt or Option, there's also the way to just activate, deactivate tag group 2. Now I can just click on here. On Windows there's also a default shortcut, which is Alt F3. With Alt F5 you can activate, deactivate tag group 2, and with Alt F6 you can activate, deactivate tag group 3. Another thing where this can be really useful if you wanna tag or render intensive layers that you can quickly activate or deactivate. So in this case I'm gonna select this grain layer, and then I could select these light wraps, for example, which also can be quite render intensive because they're clone layers. But instead of selecting these two, I could also just select the group here, for example. So I'm gonna go to Tag Untag Layers again. And maybe I don't want to put this in the second group because the second group has also this shortcut here, and maybe I want to use that space for another type of tag. So I'm gonna put this into the third tag group here. And I'm gonna call this render intensive. And I could always come up with the perform action on tag layers, click on it, and now as you can see they have been deactivated, activated again. And you can also add new layers to it. So for example, I have this lens blur here. It's really hard to see probably. It's just a very minor lens blur that is on these waves here in front. So I'm gonna go to Tag Untag Layers, and I'm gonna choose our render intensive tag group again. And now no dialog will come up because the tag group already exists, and now this has been added. But let's say I want to actually apply it to the second group here so I can access this via this button. And this is also easy, so come up to the panel again. And now you have to hold on Shift and then you click on the color. And this brings up this panel here again. So I'm going to reassign it now to the second group. And now this has been put into the second group. And as you can see, if I hold on Alt or Option, and I toggle this, this now has been disabled or enabled now. And now, just to show it to you, if I hold on Shift again, I can also just rename this to maybe render heavy or something. And now, just so everything has been shown to you, I can also just Shift click on it again and then remove it. And now this tag has been removed. But I'm going to undo this. I want to keep this tag. There are multiple tags per layer possible. Let's say I have want to tag all blurs and I want to quickly enable, disable all the blur layers. So I can just come up with Tag Untag Layers again. Now I'm going to go to the third group, call this blur maybe. And as you can see now, another tag has been created here. And if I would want to, I could also just act only specifically on the blur group here. But I don't want it. So we'll come up to Tag Untag Layers. And then we just, we need our layer selected, of course. And then just remove it like this. Or even easier, I'm going to undo this now. You can also just right click onto it and then just say delete this marker, just use AE's function for it, and this will also just remove it from the group. Let's see, you see the third spot, there's nothing in it. In this example here, we have these waves that were rendered out of Houdini, and there's of course a multipass EXR that we got. So, and all these layers now are kind of scattered around the comp as, you know, some Luma mat, or I used the reflection path or something like that. You could also just tag these layers and then you can act on them very easily. Generally, what I do, I haven't done it here yet, just so I can show you. At the beginning, I would just tag all my passes here, and then I would just duplicate them, move them to the appropriate spots. Since they're tagged, I'm duplicating the tag as well, and then it's very easy to perform an action on them afterwards. So let me just do that very quickly. Tag all the layers in this comp that are multipass layers. Add them to the 3D waves tag group. Now they're all tagged. And let's say now I don't like the waves as they are, and we have rendered out actually a bit more than the actual shot length. And what I can do now is go to perform action on tag layers. Then I'm going to go to select, and now I'm going to go to the 3D waves. Now they're all selected, and now I could just, I don't know, move them maybe to this spot. And now the waves are at a different position. And the great thing is that, of course, all other passes, everything where I used like some depth map or whatever, now everything has been aligned properly. Now if I execute refresh layout, the tags will, you know, revert back to the position they were originally created at, which is kind of nice. And this is also, of course, really great if I were to move everything back. But now I don't see the markers anymore, of course. But then just execute refresh layout, and now they're back at their original position. So let's say I have my main key and I have it tagged as, you know, let's tag it as key. And this group here is closed. And let's say I'm working, you know, somewhere down here. And now I want to go to my key, but if I have a big comp, and then even finding your layer can take quite some time. So just go to perform action tag layers, then you go to jump to, and then you select our key. And now it will jump to in the timeline to the layer, and it also expands the group where it's in, and it selects the layer, and now we can quickly work on that key layer here. Now for another feature that probably a lot of motion designers are gonna like. It's the ability to relabel your keyframes using the Relabel panel. To be honest, I'm not really so much of a motion designer, of course. I'm more of a compositing guy, so I don't really use this feature that much. But, you know, you see I have this tremendously beautiful animation here, so I'm capable of doing that, of course. Since I don't really use this feature much, I don't really know how you would, you know, label your keyframes. But yeah, if you were to do it with After Effects, let's say I want to, you know, label these here, then you have to go here, go to label, and then select something here. Kind of annoying, takes a long time. And now you can just select your keyframes, then come up with the relabel layers, pick whatever label color I want. And the great thing is I can do it like this. As you already know, just use the number here, which is even faster. Like this. Bams. Now do these here. Use this color maybe. And now use maybe 5. You can also just relabel all keyframes of a certain label group. So let's say I have these here also in that label group. So I have my keyframes here, and I can't really even see where all the other keyframes are, but I want to change all of them out of the same label group. So you can just come up with the panel again, and I want to change it to this color maybe. So you would hold on Control and or a Command, and as well as Alt or Option, and then you click on a color, and this will change every color within the selected label group. Another nice thing is that you can select keyframe label group, just have whatever keyframe label selected, then go to select group. This will select all the keyframes in the label group. You could also add to that selection, which is not the case if you would do it with After Effects select label group function. So let's say I have also this one selected and then execute select group. Just use the shortcut. This will also just select additionally all the keyframes. There have been some new things that have been added to the Precompose function. So we are working on the short film at the moment, and I wanted to export all the clips for the visual effects workflow. So I brought in the edit from Premiere, and as you can see, all the cuts align to each other. That's how it came out of Premiere. I already did something here, so don't look at this. And now I want to basically pre-compose every of these layers here, but I want to pre-compose them separately in order to be able to, separately export them as, a DPX, XR sequence, whatever we want in our visual effects workflow. I already renamed all the layers, with a custom script of mine. That's not included in workflow, but I'm sure if you want to conform all your layers to this naming convention, I'm sure there are like a bazillion, renaming tools out there for After Effects that you can do this. Now go to Precompose, and now you have this option when you have several layers selected to create a precomp for each selected clip. Then I'm going to use the layer names here, as I already defined them. Otherwise, it will just increment whatever is here. And another great thing is you can set the start timecode to the source timecode, which you generally want in a visual effects workflow, because then it's easier to conform everything afterwards. And also what you want in such a visual effects workflow is to use handles, because maybe you'll change your mind in the edit and then you need the extra space. So I'm going to use the handles, and you can define frame in and frame out for everything. And everything else looks good. I'm going to go with comp size, of course, and click OK. This will take a little bit, and I'm going to speed up this part now. And now it's finished, and as you can see, it has pre-composed every layer here. It has used the name it was provided here as the layer name, and you can also see these precomps now overlap, and this means workflow has created our handles in front of it, which is of course really nice. And if I click inside, you see that the timecode is also some weird number. That means it should be correct. So it has been set to the source timecode here. And there are also some other new additions to the Precompose function. I'm just gonna, brush over them right now. But if I say, okay, I want to leave all attributes, which I sometimes want to do, but now you also have this option to adjust the composition to the span of the selected layers, which isn't possible in regular After Effects. And also another new addition here is that you can not only select leave all attributes, but you can now also select leave only transform attributes, because sometimes I also have a mask and some effects in here that I really want to precompose, but I kind of want to keep the transform attributes that I want to play with still. Alright, thank you very much. This was my brief overview of the new functions. There are, quite a few more functions. I can't really cover everything in here, but I would urge you to look into the changelog of the new version. So there's the releases in the user guide. Of course, it's this is just I'm in editing mode at the moment, so I don't know whether that will be the release or not. Hopefully I will make it there. And just look through it, and there are also links to all the user guide pages, which explain so much more than I was able to explain to you right now. And there you can see, all the new matting tools here, for example. Invisible mats now display this new icon, as you maybe already saw. the relabeling capabilities, the layer tagging I told you about, new group functions. For example, when you execute ungroup layers on a groupless layer, it will now be moved after the next group, which is quite handy. There are new trimming functions. For example, you can trim your layers to the keyframe or to another specific layer. There's also the possibility, which is in beta at the moment, to rig multipass layers and set them up from a precomp, which can be really handy. You can, when you execute rename layers while you have a property selected, you can rename that layer to the selected property, which you also have to enable because it's disabled by default. What else is new here? When you execute reveal layer opacity, for example, while you have a property selected, all contained properties with an opacity will be revealed too. So if you have, for example, an effect selected, which always has an effect opacity, this will now be revealed in the timeline. When you use add remove layer references, there's new functionality. There's a scripting API in beta at the moment. And yeah, just look through it. There are quite a few things. There's quite a few things that you can discover. So I hope this was kind of insightful. And yeah, let me know what you think. If you encounter any bugs, of course, let me know. But I'm also happy if you just tell me that you like the script. Yeah, this has been it for me. And I wish you all a great day. And I hope you have a lot of fun with Workflow and After Effects, as long as we can still have our fun until AI, takes all of our jobs and eventually kills us. But maybe we'll have 3 or 4 more weeks if we're lucky at the pace everything is developing at the moment. All right, then see you later. Bye.